Greetings everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm your host, Hadron. On this week's episode, the battle in the field to gain control of the Empire is over. Victorious over the last who dare challenge his sole authority, Octavian must struggle to avoid the same pitfall his adopted father had fallen into. Faced with continuing resistance, we watch as Octavian plays the most dangerous game imaginable, laying the foundation for the future and the pillars of the Roman Empire. Without any further delay, let's get on with this week's episode. Octavian was now the master of the Roman Empire. His final victory over Mark Antony and Cleopatra had secured for him total domination of the Mediterranean basin and beyond. Interestingly, however, he now found himself in almost the exact same position as his adopted father, Julius Caesar. With sole control of the Republic, Caesar had courted the idea of making himself king. The problem, however, was not one exclusive to Caesar alone. To understand the Roman hatred for the idea of a kingship, we need to understand the genesis of the Republic at large. After the deposition and exile of the last Roman king, Tarquinius Superbus, and the founding of the Republic in 509 BC, the Romans had sworn off the idea of a monarchy completely. Instead of the rule of a single man, the Romans became an oligarchy. With this, effectively, the new nobles of the city each vied with each other to compete for the top positions and posts in the burgeoning republic. Even the mention of the idea that you could be trying to make yourself king could be met with death. Men like Tiberius Gracchus and his brother were painted as trying to become king, seeking to steal absolute power for themselves. With decades of civil war near the end of the Republic, the true cream of the Roman senatorial order had been largely purged. The old guard had been whittled down to nearly nothing. Even so, there was still this stigma, this stain, this very idea of a king. Caesar had been so immensely popular with the masses that not even he could sell the idea to the people. Octavian at this point was nowhere near his father's equal in the love he commanded by the populace at large. Yet now, master of all the legions of Rome, with sole personal command of Egypt, the wealthiest lands in the world, he was a king, one in all but name. Octavian had grown to understand the minds of his fellow senators. He learned their inner workings in the years prior to his sole rule. He reasoned that these men could and would give up the actual power, but they would never give up was their dignity. Thus he understood the game, he knew the players. He returned to Rome to set in motion several compromises that would ultimately become the foundations of his newfound empire. Initially, the first settlement saw Octavian offer to relinquish all his power, offering to return it all to the Senate. He would lay down his burdens, return the army to the control of the people. The Senate and the population at large were horrified by the idea as they saw the future of even more civil war and carnage on their doorstep. The Senate offered to allow Octavian to keep his control of the provinces and armies of Rome. Feigning reluctance and likely responsible for orchestrating the entire affair, he agreed to a 10-year compromise. This ratification of his powers saw the militarized provinces of Rome placed under his personal control. The non-military provinces ceded back to the ultimate control of the Senate. The senators would and could once more continue their game of trading offices and favors, pursuing commands of these provinces, and establishing themselves with the prestige that it would gain for them. The illusion of power without the actual substance. Now in command of the vast amount of the Roman legions, Octavian was still the most powerful man in the Roman world. With huge sums of wealth, his personal fortune became the state treasury. The Senate controlled 5 legions. Octavian commanded 20. On the 16th of January 27 BC, the Senate hoisted upon Octavian the twin titles of Augustus, or the Revered One, and the title of Princeps, or First Citizen. In 23 BC, the second settlement was forged. In this new compromise, the issue of Augustus holding one of the 2 consular offices every year became problematic. It was creating a huge backlog of eligible office holders to this highest office of the Republic. It also gave lie to the idea the Republic had been restored with such a naked and visible office held yearly without end by a single man. After surrendering the consulship, he was granted the powers of the tribunate or the tribunicia potestas for life. This power allowed him to convene the Senate, propose legislation, and veto bills in the Senate as well. This, combined with his personal command of the legions, his enormous wealth, allowed him to continue his rule from the sidelines, working as a puppet master behind the scenes to control things out of the public eye and away from the still Republican-minded senators that resisted him. Augustus needed some form of official position within the state. He was granted imperium within the boundaries of the Pomerium of Rome, or the ability to command troops in the city. Thus he founded the Praetorian Guard, his own personal bodyguard, which became the future enforcers of his will, at sword point if needed. It, however, thankfully never came to that. When Augustus did not stand for consul in 22 BC, the plebs of the city became concerned and angry. His greatest supporters grew fearful that their champion had been replaced or forced out by the Senate. This caused actual riots within the city on 3 separate occasions as the people railed against this perceived injustice of their leader. In 12 BC, Marcus Lepidus, former triumvir, finally expired, vacating the office of the Pontifex Maximus, or High Priest of Rome, which he had held since the death of Caesar. Augustus took control of this sacred office, further adding to his personal powers of both secular and religious matters of state. Back in 23 BC, Augustus had been very ill. So ill, in fact, that he had named Marcus Agrippa, his right hand, as his successor in the event that he succumbed to this illness. The real question stood on the minds of almost everyone. If Augustus died, who or how would they succeed him? The last thing the war-ravaged empire wanted was another round of bloody civil wars for control of the fragile and still recovering state. With Agrippa now established as his heir, there was a level of security and continuity with the Senate and the people of Rome, which they desperately needed. Agrippa's death in 12 BC, however, had robbed both Augustus of his lifelong friend and the empire of its clear line of succession. Initially having favored his sister's son, Marcus Claudius Marcellus, for the position, his death in 23 BC ended this possibility. Married to Julia the Elder, Augustus's daughter, she had become widowed. Then he had Julia remarried, this time to Agrippa in 23 BC. With Agrippa's untimely passing, he now remarried his twice-widowed daughter to Tiberius Claudius Nero, the son of Livia, by her first marriage. The only problem was, Tiberius was very happy with his wife Vipsania, and did not want to divorce her, and was forced to marry a Julia, a situation which created a huge rift between Tiberius and Augustus. Julia had a very colorful reputation in the city, which flew in the face of her father and his morality campaign within the city. Scandalized by her many public affairs, Augustus exiled her to 2 different islands. He never forgave her, or allowed her to leave her exile, despite the pleas of the citizens of the city who lobbied for her return. She died in exile years after her father's death. After Agrippa's passing, Tiberius and his brother Drusus were now elevated to the line of succession. The death of Drusus in 9 BC, however, left Tiberius as the clear heir apparent. Both brothers had waged many successful campaigns in the name of Augustus. After his campaigns against the Marcomanni, Tiberius returned to Rome. Now, in line of succession and set to inherit Augustus' power, he unexpectedly announced his retirement from public life, planning to head to Rhodes and leave the city behind him. The reasoning for this bizarre move has been lost to history. One possibility was the grandchildren of Augustus, fathered by Agrippa with his daughter Julia. Gaius and Lucius were coming of age, and Augustus had now adopted them both as his children. Tiberius' departure cleared the stage for these youths, and it was possible that Tiberius had merely been a stand-in, holding the position only temporarily. The 57-year-old Augustus was still not ready to hand power to his grandsons at this point, and Tiberius may have likely jumped the gun, throwing the emperor's planned succession into crisis. There are stories that tell of Augustus begging Tiberius to stay and not to leave. As to the validity of these, one can only speculate the truth. 11 years later, in 2 AD, Lucius died at the age of 18 from sudden illness. Then, only 2 years later, in 4 AD, Gaius also died at the age of 23 from sudden illness as well, while in the East. These 2 deaths have always given rise to the fantastical idea that it had been Augustus' own wife, Livia, who had dispatched the 2 young men to pave the road for her own son, Tiberius, to return to Rome and reclaim his status. Fiction or not, this left Augustus with only one clear choice. For 13 years, Tiberius had been in exile. At first it had been self-imposed, but as the years had passed, he had wished to return home. Augustus, likely angry with him, still refused to allow him to return from this exile. Now, however, his hand was forced by either cruel fate or the machinations of the more human variety. Tiberius would be his heir. There was simply no other choice. It was now that Augustus adopted Tiberius as his son, full stop. He also commanded Tiberius to adopt Germanicus, his nephew and the son of Drusus, as his own heir, as one of the requirements of assuming this position that he was so reluctantly thrust into. In 9 AD, a humiliating defeat in the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, commanded by General Varus, left 3 legions of Romans dead in the woods of Germany. With nearly 20,000 gone, this defeat ground the Roman advance to Germany into a halt. This shocking turn of events would lead Augustus for the rest of his life to spontaneously shout out, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." By the year 13 AD, Tiberius was effectively the co-emperor of Rome, ruling alongside Augustus, ensuring the setup for a smooth transition, which was now in place. The last possible heir and claimant to the throne was the young Agrippa Postumus, brother of Gaius and Lucius, who had been exiled in 7 AD after the ascension of Tiberius. On the 19th of August, 14 AD, in the month that now bears his name, Augustus Caesar died while visiting Nola in Italy, where his own father had also passed away. Rumors and legends have Livia, concerned for her son's ascension, poisoning her husband with tainted figs. Married for 50 years, it's hard to imagine this to be so, yet for centuries this tale has endured. Agrippa Postumus, either by the orders of Tiberius, Augustus, or someone else in the Senate, was killed shortly thereafter. For 40 years, Augustus had brought autocratic stability to the shattered Roman state. Ruthless beyond belief, with a keen mind, he used his talents to take the reins of power while playing the part of a republican, dedicated to maintaining the principles of the Republic, all the while accumulating tremendous wealth and power for himself and his family. The very length of his life and reign left an entire generation to be born into a world where there had always been an Augustus, there had always been an emperor. In a time with much shorter lifespans, many of the old guard had passed away, easing the transition from the oligarchic regime of the old republic and to the imperial regime of the new empire. Augustus's last words were so apt for this man. "Have I played the part well? Then I applaud as I exit." The newly established Principate would continue for centuries, as would the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, which had now been established, which would last for centuries, with only a few minor hiccups along the way. Stay tuned for the next episode as Tiberius Caesar Augustus rises to the very reluctant role he had been thrust into, to become the master of the Roman world. Now free from the overbearing shadow of Augustus, Tiberius was free to set out to create his own path as emperor of the Roman Empire. If you're enjoying this series and want to support the channel, please click the like button and subscription buttons below. Also, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of the episodes that will be upcoming in this series. Please also follow me at HadrianTV on Twitter to be kept in the loop for upcoming videos. Thanks for watching.